Hi, I'm Al Rico Mancini, and I'm employed by the Division of Public Utilities.
Stephen Shalala, Chief Accountant for the Division of Public Utilities.
Now, Mr. Mancini, did you review the filing? And can you explain your role?
Basically, as an analyst for the division, I reviewed the standard offer filing submitted by National Grid. I reviewed the proposed standard offer rates, the calculations, and also the procurement process, and made sure that it was in compliance with the division order from the previous 4605 document.
Okay, and did you familiarize yourself with the procurement plan?
Yes.
That was approved by the PUC.
Yes.
Okay. And as a result of that, did you prepare a memorandum?
Yes.
Were you the sole author of that memorandum?
No, also Steve Shalava assisted in that memo.
Mr. Shalava, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You identified yourself as a chief accountant, is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you tell me what your role was in this docket?
Well, I reviewed the filing as well. Mr. Mancini typically does the more detailed review with these standard offer price changes. And most of the calculations, which you see in the memo, were performed by him. And I reviewed all those, and he added some additional information in this memorandum to the relative large size of the increase in the standard offer rate from the summer to the winter period.
Okay, so as a result of your review and preparation of this memorandum, you adopt this as your testimony here today.
Yes,
Do you have any revisions that you need to make?
not that I'm aware of.
No.
I will turn them over for questioning.
National Grid does not have any questions for this panel.
Mr. Matheron?
Thank you.
Again, I won't direct the question to either of you. Whoever feels best to answer the question, feel free. I'm sorry, much too informal. You were aware that the Lieutenant Governor participated with the division in the creation of the Empower RI website?
I guess.
And do you think it would be a good idea for the PUC to take a look at why the competitive suppliers are currently, as we sit here today, able to offer a price of 6.2 cents for residential versus 9.5 cents being discussed today, and see whether or not there might be something to be learned from the competitive suppliers with regard to possibly changing the procurement plan for grid?
I'm not sure you're going to be able to determine exactly why they offer the prices they offer. I looked at the prices on the website, and except for really a single supplier, the other two suppliers who offer in the 6 cent range, Grid's current price is 6.2 cents, I believe. The other two suppliers don't go into the winter months. I don't know if those prices are going to hold for another month. They may go up as we approach the winter. And the balance of the suppliers are offering 12-month or longer terms with the corresponding higher prices. The one supplier who is offering a 6-month plan, which if you signed up today would bring you, I guess, through February. I don't know what his business model is. He may, through his experience, have an expectation of retaining, a certain percentage of that load on month-to-month pricing, and he'll make his profit on the back end. That's possible, but that's pure speculation on my part. regarding National Grid's procurement as the mandated supplier of last resort, and as sort of the benchmark against which suppliers compete against. I think there's value in having some certainty in their procurement methodology. Another reason a supplier might be able to offer or have a slight advantage is their customers are locked up 6 months at a time. And the suppliers for National Grid have to deal with maybe a little more risk of load migration because their customers are not locked up. So there might be a slightly higher risk premium added for that migration risk. Those are my thoughts to your question. I'm not sure if we can really get at behind the supplier's rates.
Is there any downside, though, to taking a look at it? In other words, right now, basically what you're doing, I think by your own admission, is you're giving your best estimate as to what's probably going on here. But what would be the downside to taking a more formal look at it and see whether there's something we could use?
As to how the suppliers procure,
Yes.
I mean, they're non-regulated, so I don't know if we have any ability to get behind those offers.
Well, I mean, it'd be one thing to, the fact that the commission may not have the authority to force them to come here doesn't mean that they might not be more than happy to come here and explain what they do. Would you agree?
Well, I'm not sure that's our role, and I'm not trying to be evasive, but we regulate National Grid, and we try to follow a policy which the Commission has laid out of providing price stability, dollar cost averaging, picking multiple price points, and for different types of setting a price signal within the pricing periods. Other types of offers are available in the competitive market. Add more to that.
What about the changes that Grid proposed that the commission rejected? Do you think maybe the commission should take a second look at those changes?
At the time, I think the commission supported at least one of the changes, the elimination of the 24-month contract. I think we were fairly neutral on whether they tried to get a fixed price for the 6-month period or went kept with the month-to-month pricing. I thought the commission's rationale was valid in sticking with the procurement plan, just to have a longer time period to get data and see how the results of the procurement went over a longer time period. But I mean, yeah, I mean, we'd be open to looking at any changes.
Have you ever run any numbers to see whether or not, if the commission had adopted those suggested changes rather than rejecting them, we wouldn't be looking at 9.5 cents today?
I have not, but I don't think the elimination of the 24-month contract would have had a material change.
But you haven't run the numbers, so you don't really
No.
know. You think that might be worthwhile? To at least run the numbers.
Well, we could ask National Grid to, I think Mr. McCauley said it might be difficult to duplicate the scenario of the what if, you know, going back and trying to see if they had taken different contracts, because they didn't get the bids for those periods. They had a 24-month, they went up for 24 months. I'd have to ask if the company could do that, get a realistic answer. I don't know.
You heard us talking about possibly giving National Grid some additional flexibility in the procurement plan. You were here during that conversation, correct?
Correct.
What's your thinking about that? Do you think that the commission should give some thought to modifying the procurement plan so that Grid has some flexibility to adapt to changes in the market?
Well, they have flexibility on an annual basis to propose changes to the procurement. Every March 1st, they're required to submit a new procurement plan. And I believe they retain the flexibility to, even within an approved plan, if they see market conditions that would warrant going off, I think they could come to the commission and try to make a case for taking advantage of what they saw as a market opportunity. In terms of building in flexibility into the process, I think I would need better understanding of what the exact details in terms of the flexibility were. I think there's a benefit to the marketers themselves to know, have an understanding of how grid procures, and that's, what the pricing periods and the nature of the procurement. I think that helps the suppliers compete against National Grid standard offer.
I believe in the division's memorandum, they suggested as one of the possible mitigation options that customers take a look at the Empower RI website and see what other rates might be available, correct?
Correct.
Now, am I correct that as we sit here today, approximately 90% of the industrial load is served by a competitive supplier, not grid?
That's correct.
And approximately 50% of the commercial load is served by a competitive supplier, not grid?
Yes, if Mr. Mancini's representation to me was accurate, yes.
And I gotta believe it is.
Okay.
But only about 13% of the residential load is served by a competitive supplier currently, correct?
Correct.
Any idea why there's such a discrepancy?
Well, I mean, the current rate of National Grid is 6.2 cents. It's the lowest it's been, I think, since 2004. If you look at on the Commission's website, the history of the standard offer prices, the price we're in right now is a relatively very low pricing period.
But it's about to go up by 53%.
Right, so we may see that just based upon the coverage of this filing, we may see those numbers grow in the next reporting period.
Can you think of anything that the division might be able to do? And by the way, the Lieutenant Governor is very appreciative of what the division has already done in terms of creating Empower RI. We know that wasn't easy. Grid was also helpful in that, and it's certainly a very large step in the right direction, so thank you very much. But can you think of anything else that might be done to get the word out to the 87% of people who haven't made the switch?
Well, one thing which just recently occurred, spurred on by a legislative requirement, on Grid's bills, and I think this was only occurred in the last month or so, they put a price to compare on every bill, regardless of who your supplier is, Grid or competitive supplier, and it states Grid's current standard offer rate is X. This rate is in effect for the date, and you asked a question about whether it directs you to the website. I don't recall if it does or doesn't. We'll have to look at the bill. It may not.
Would you agree that would be a good idea if it did?
Yeah, it's subject to the ability of the company to fit it on the bill.
And you heard the testimony in response to my questions that next year we're going to be sitting here not just looking at 9.5 cents, but probably looking at 11.5 cents ballpark, and the following year even more than that.
On that one, I agree the winter, after this winter, we see the price going up, but the auction, I think it was 10 and 11. I think the capacity prices 2 winters out are actually coming down. So I would agree to that for next winter, not necessarily the winter beyond that.
Okay. Does the division have any suggestions at all about what can possibly be done to take a look at National Grid's approved procurement plan and try to avoid this from happening again?
Well, all retail suppliers are buying from the same New England market. So, as I sit here, I don't have a magic bullet to offer you. I think that's all I have.
Has the division given any thought at all to possibly hiring a consultant that could take a look at the present approved procurement plan and determining whether or not some tweaks might be made to help the ratepayers?
Well, we have engaged, and he's still a division consultant, Richard Hahn from Denmark. And he was involved in the review of National Grid's last procurement plan in which they suggested changes, as well as their filing this past year, in which they sought to make no changes. And his recommendation was that was a reasonable plan. Early on in the standard offer procurements, Grid began doing after the long-term contract ended with coming out of restructuring. Mr. Hahn recommended not going with all load following service all requirements contracts, and wanted Grid to more actively manage the load. The company did not support that. The commission went with the current plan we have. I don't know whether if his recommendation would have yielded a different result or a better result. It would have required much more active management on the part of National Grid, and would have maybe subject customers to a little more risk. But I mean, it's something we look at every year. So if we can build a better mousetrap, we'll bring it forward.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
I have no questions.
Mr. Shalala, Mr. Mancini, do the standard low-income and medical protections apply to customers who are on competitive supply?
Yes, I believe they do.
Mr. Shalala, wasn't one of the ideas behind standard offer service and last resort service, which were adopted under restructuring, to encourage competition, to encourage independent power producers to compete against the utility?
That's my understanding. The original 12-year supply contract that National Grid entered into in 1998 had prices set for every year, and those prices increased every year. And I believe it was explained to me back then that the idea was to gently nudge people into the market. So every year, they know there'd be a price increase from the utility, and they'd start shopping around. There was also a fuel reopener as part of that contract. And that was in place through 2009. The market never developed for anyone but the largest customers during that whole time period for, I guess, a variety of reasons. So it came out of that 12-year supply contract into 2010, and they still had all the customers. So that's when we developed the procurement plan, the beginnings of what we ended up with today. But yes, the idea was, with the original restructuring, that the market would be the supplier. There would be very few customers on utility-provided service. I'm not saying I ever believed that, but that's what others believed. So, that got me a cup of coffee, I guess. So.
Thank you very much.
This is just, do you happen to know, Mr. Mancini, how many income-eligible customers take advantage of competitive supply? Does anyone have those data?
I believe we do have those numbers. Just give me a minute.
We take that as a record request. They have to, in these access reports, they probably have to put a number of numbers together and make sure that what is being reported isn't part of the confidential.
Thank you. Not a crucial question.
But you want to give your record request? Or do you-
I mean, just to give you a ballpark figure, it looks like there's a reasonable amount. I would say ballpark 10 to 15%. So it's not minimal, it's a decent amount. But we would have to run them.
That will suffice.
Commissioner, I believe we have the information if we wanted to do that through one of our witnesses. That would be easier and
Sure,
shorter.
that's what, if
Time on record
that's
request.
appropriate.
All right, do you have any further questions for these witnesses?
Do you want me, if it's appropriate, I mean, I have the information right here, if I can hand it over.
Do you want to just swear, have somebody sworn?
Yeah, well, I mean, I could just bring Mr. Crary back up. if that's-
Okay. I just want to excuse this.
Okay.